Welcome to another teaching from perfectingtheworld.com.
Good evening. It's so good to see you. Welcome to Torah Tuesdays for now the mid part of August. We are in the countdown of the month of Elul, leading up to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The next few classes are going to be focused specifically on the theme of God's kingship relative to the image of God and Adam's role in the garden. We're going to be looking at Adam in a regnal, a kingly fashion. We're going to be looking at his role, his calling, his vocation in Genesis 2. We're going to be fashioning that in a way that points us to the significance of God being coronated as king as we come here to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'll explain more about the biblical and traditional imagery that goes into that, but Rosh Hashanah or Yom Teruah is the announcement of the coming near of the king, and Yom Kippur is the coronation, the crowning, the reception of God as king. This is an annual cycle that we live through in the Jewish liturgical year, and we are in the countdown to these days. These are very significant times. In many traditional settings, the shofar is sounded every morning. In some settings, prayers of a penitential nature, salichot, are said every morning. In my tradition, it's just the week before Rosh Hashanah. This said, we're in a very significant time, very meaningful time, and the next few lessons are going to be focused on the theme of God's kingship and the kingship of Adam. A reminder about schedule. Tomorrow, we're back on field notes. We've been looking deeply at the Torah's native grammar of grafting and of the sojourner. And we've been looking at that from a very biblically, textually serious manner. And after some 15 sessions, I brought in the first quote from Talmud. So as a supporting witness to the historical formulation of the sojourner. As a reminder, we have our most controversial offering, the NT project, on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. Just as a heads up, we've drawn some criticism for offering that, and I need to reassert, as you all know, that we are traditional Orthodox Jews. We don't always sound traditional, and that's because we have a very non-traditional background. Okay, as many of you know, I have a background that's extensively informed with Second Temple Jewish literature, with the Greek language, with Second Temple Judaism and the ancient Near East. And so I come at some of this literature with a very different angle. And we have found that the study that we're doing is very helpful for many people as they seek to orient themselves to Hashem, as they seek to shed avodah zarah, and also to help Jews come home. The New Testament, as many of you know, has been used as a weapon against the Jewish people for nearly 2,000 years. The irony is that the New Testament was written by Jews, and it's been weaponized against us. Our goal, our objective, is to launch the counteroffensive in a way that's not been done, in a way that's deeper, more meaningful, and more engaging than what's been done here in the past. As we continue on Tuesday evenings, our big meta theme is currently the image of God. The image of God as depicted in the two creation stories in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 and Genesis 2:4 to 3:24. We most likely will be continuing this study through the early part of 2027. With that said, we are already starting to ask the question about what topic people want to see us look at next. There is a Facebook poll I encourage you to go take a look at. A few of the topics I put out there were the question of grafting into Israel. What does that mean from a Torah perspective, from the Torah and the prophets and from Jewish law? And then the next question is, What is the non-Jew's relationship to Shabbat? Can the non-Jew have a positive relationship to Shabbat? Absolutely. And we're going to be potentially speaking about that. So, and then others have proposed other topics, including the possibility of doing a weekly study on the parasha from the Midrashim. So please cast your vote. We still have a few months before we get there. We have a lot of depth yet to cover in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. A lot of depth to cover. I can't really overstate that. It's exciting, and it's quite compelling. Continuing here, as a reminder, this is the big picture of what we've seen so far in the first creation story. In Genesis 1 1 to 2 3, we have a creation story that's formed along the liturgical shape of the 7-day week, which culminates on the Shabbat. On the 6th day, we have the appointment of the image of God. The image of God is specifically a delegated or a vocational role to represent God, to complete the work that God has started in the creation. This delegation comes to its head on the 7th day, the day that is unbounded within the first creation story. The word Shabbat is not used there as a noun. The word Shavat, the verb is used. It means to cease. It means to occupy. We've drawn a lot of connections with the temple there. The picture that we see emerging in the first creation story is the idea that God is seeking to dwell within these lower worlds, He's not seeking to remove humans from the physical world. He's seeking to dwell within these worlds, and humans are here to do two things. One, to elevate the physical world, and to bring godliness down into these worlds. It's a beautiful thing. The degree to which Torah Judaism affirms the goodness of matter and creation, and the fact that matter truly does matter, it has significance and importance within God's mind, within God's priorities. It's huge. The second creation story that we're looking at now is Genesis 2:4 to 3:24. As we've been noting, this is a differently aligned creation story than the first creation story. And it is essential to recognize the differences and not to flatten the differences. These differences are meant to be there. They're meant to be glaring and obvious to the reader. And in recognizing the differences, we learn some incredible things about who God is and about the nature of the God-world relationship and the calling of humanity within the creation. A big theme that we're going to continue, Genesis 2 and 3, is this aphorism: power without formation is seized coronation, matured under Torah, just administration. Power without formation, seized coronation, matured under Torah, just administration. There is a calling on humanity, beginning right with the garden, right with Adam, to grow into a maturity, to be able to fulfill the role of the image of God. And this role is hinted right at the beginning in the second creation story. The second creation story begins with a dilemma. It says, Adam ein la'avod eth ha'adama. There was no human to garden the land. The land is described as waste and dry and dusty. It's a land in which there is no water. The contrast here is incredible. Okay, the first creation story, as we know, begins with chaotic waters. It begins with unbounded waters that need to be bounded and put under restrictions before the creation can continue. The second creation story begins with barrenness and dryness. Instead of being bounded, the problem is there is no human to till the soil, to irrigate the land. And so the issue is not binding, the issue is loosening the waters to allow for water to spread. Very different than the first creation story, where water is dangerous and needs to be bounded. Now, the contrast here is huge, and we're not going this week into the full mystical components here of the Chesed and the Gevura. This is coming up, especially as we get into the creation of the woman at the end of Genesis 2. There's some beautiful, deep material coming in that. As the text tells us here, Adam ayin la'avod eth ha'adama. There was no human to do the avoda, to do the irrigation, the gardening of the land. In the first creation story, we have water that needs to be bound up. And we have learned that the attribute of gevura is the act of severity and of binding. This is also the sephira, the attribute that maps onto the divine name Elohim, the divine name which is used exclusively to refer to God in the first creation story, used 35 times, which is a multiple of 7 by 5. Throughout the first creation story, God is putting boundaries on the chaos. God is expressing gevura. In the second creation story, we have a need for the unbinding of the water. The water is too bounded. It needs to be unbound by the gardener. We need more chesed. Chesed is the removal of the boundaries. It is the compassion. Where the gevura is the binding and the severity, the setting of limits. The chesed is the opposite. Chesed trends toward the spreading and the loosening of boundaries. Now, obviously, within our lives, we experience the need for these different orientations at different times in our lives. The first creation story begins with the need for gevura, the second with chesed, and it's no accident that the second creation story also introduces to us the divine name, the Yod He and the Wah He, which ties in with the chesed. The gevura is the need for the binding at the first creation story. The second creation story needs the chesed, the loosening. It needs the human, it needs the Adam to be there, to be the loosening of the waters, to become the channels of release to the world. It's really quite fascinating because when you look at the first creation story, you look at the chaos, you look at God appointing humanity to subdue the creation, to hold back the chaos, and to reaffirm the boundaries. But notice what happens at the end of the first creation story. We have the goal of the Shabbat, a day and the only day in the 7-day creation narrative that has no limits. It has no setting and it has no rising, no morning, no evening like the other days of creation. It is unbounded. So we go from the unbounded to the disciplined binding, back into the unbounded. And the reality is, in the second creation story, we go from a need to unbind, okay, and then we go into the unbounded, and then we're going to find later, we're not ready for it yet, that we move back into a binding, back into a severity. Now, we've proposed the possibility, and this is something that this is a hill I'm not going to die on, but there are some textual cues that suggest that the tree of life and the tree of knowledge are the same tree. We've pointed out that twice in Genesis 2 and 3, once in Genesis 2, once in Genesis 3, both trees are given the description Bethok Hagan, in the middle of the garden. Okay, first of all, the tree of life is told to be Bethok Hagan, in the middle of the garden. Likewise, the tree of knowledge is said to be Bethok Hagan. There is only one textual challenge to this. It's in Genesis 3, 23, and 24, where it uses the word gam, referring to also, in describing both trees, and it might very well be that is completely harmonizable. But if we didn't have that, just working at this level, it appears to be that both trees are occupying, at the very minimum, the same space. As we get later into our chapters, we're going to look at some possible reconciliations for why they appear to be both 1 and 2 at the same time. Okay, but we see that the tree of life is said to be pleasant to the sight, and we hear the testimony from Eve that the tree of knowledge is good for food. We've proposed that the command of the Arlah, this is the command of the fruit tree that's planted in the land of Israel, in Eretz Israel, that the waiting to eat that fruit is the paradigm for the tree of life, tree of knowledge in the garden. The planter, the gardener, needs to wait for 4 years before he can access that tree and eat the fruit. For the first 3 years, the fruit is prohibited. For the 4th year, it is holy to Hashem. It is given over to Hashem. And on the 5th year, tocholu et perio. On the 5th year, you may eat its fruit. We've been proposing that the maturation process of the Adam, of the human in the garden, was a process of growing into access to the tree. That for the first 3-4 years, the access was by sight, and in the 5th year, the access was by eating. That sight we've proposed is the idea of looking upon the Torah and growing through learning the Torah, okay? Learning the difference between good and evil and maturing into the type of person that can make decisions about tov l'ra, about good and evil. Part of the bridge to how we've come to that conclusion is looking at the fact that the Proverbs calls the Torah Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. Okay, the Torah calls the Torah an Eitz Chaim. And we saw Psalm 19 specifically uses the descriptors for the tree of knowledge to also describe the Torah. This is in Psalm 19. The idea of being nechmad, being desirable. Me'ir athanayim, giving light, or heskel, or sechel, or wisdom to the eyes. Mechimath peti, giving perception to the simple. Tov la'achol, being good for eating, being compared to honey. And giving nefesh, which is soul, and chaim, which is life. These descriptors are very closely mapped onto each other. And the idea here is that the Adam, the human, disciplines himself to the Torah of Hashem, the Torah Hashem, and prepares himself to be in the capacity of being the image of God. When Adam becomes a living soul, how does he become a living soul? We saw through the chiastic the last couple of weeks that he is paralleled to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The chiastic that calls him the nefesh chaya, the living soul, also connects him to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Go back and look at the last 2 classes for a review of that. The proposal that we've made is that he is preparing to eat from the tree, from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Okay. During the time before he eats it, this is compared to the command for the Arlah, the prohibition against eating the fruit. He looks upon the tree, it is pleasant to the sight, and only when he has matured is he able to take of the fruit and eat it. Okay, and of course, all that we're saying here is, I think this is a very likely construction. It makes an incredible degree of sense. It's a call to action to all of us to mature through the Torah, to be the type of people who can participate in being the image of God. Part of which is to be able to make decisions on good and evil. I'm not talking about relativism. I'm talking about disciplined Torah decisions regarding good and evil. The Garden of Eden is presented in the Hebrew prophets and in the Torah as a cosmic temple. We've mentioned already how Ezekiel calls it But Eden, Gan Elohim, in Eden, the garden of God, Bahar Kodesh Elohim, the holy mountain of God. Part of how we know it's a mountain is the fact that we have the rivers flowing from it. Okay, the 4 rivers are flowing from it, which speaks to the fact that it has elevation. In the ancient world, temples were one of the main symbols of the connection point between the heavens and the earth, the point at which the divine connected with mortals here on earth. We see also the precious stones, which map onto the ephod. We see the eastward placement, which we have not gotten to yet. And the tree of life as a menorah is also a heavy theme here as well, too. Highly significant is the fact in the same section where Ezekiel says the holy mountain of God and Eden, the garden of God, Ezekiel Yehezkel, this is chapter 28, speaks of Moshav Elohim, the seat or the dwelling of God. This carries the idea of the seat or the place of judgment. This entails the idea of a council. The idea here is that Adam is being brought into the council of God to deliberate as his representative. Okay, he's being brought into a very elevated capacity, a capacity that is not just for him alone, but is the calling to which he is bringing all of humanity, a calling to which he is calling humans to be in as well. This is all of our callings. To be the image of God is to be specifically in a capacity of rulership and reigning. This is how we've discussed here the idea of Adama to Avoda. Adama is the dust, to Avoda to service. We go from the dust to the breath to the standing. Standing we've seen as the appointment for office, into a sacred space with vocation, and ultimately with dominion. Highly important are the use of these words in Genesis 2:15, where it says that Hashem took Adam, who he made outside the garden, and he rested him, that's the word there for a temple resting, a menucha, in the Garden of Eden, la'avda ul shamra, to do the avoda, to do the liturgy of the garden, and to do the shamra, the protection of the garden. He is there specifically to do both of these strongly temple words, okay? He's there to do the protection. He's there to be the protectorate of the garden. That's the word shamor, which means to protect, to guard. He's there as well to do the avoda, to do the liturgy. He's there on the offensive, okay, where the shamor entails the idea of him being in a capacity of guarding sacred space. The avoda entails the idea of bringing light and godliness and holiness into the world and elevating the world. He is in a very, for lack of better terms, a very priestly capacity, which is why we have found this verse in Proverbs 11:30 to be very significant. Pri zedek eitz chaim, the fruit of the Zadik is a tree of life. Wolocheach nefashot hacham, and the sage takes souls. The imagery here is very clear. It's the idea of him winning souls. I've mentioned before that the King James translation says that the soul winner is wise. Okay, this uses the word soul winner for locheach nefashot. He is specifically in a capacity of winning people. The imagery is very, very clear. The imagery is that Adam is in a capacity where there is a civilization outside of where he has entered. He is in a representative capacity where he is standing as a representative for humanity, and his goal, his mission, is to call the rest of humanity into this mission. We have noted before, and this is highly important, his capacity is a direct mirror of the vocation and calling of Israel as a people, the Jewish people. Okay, it is unique, and it is a calling to the rest of humanity to give up avodah zarah, okay, to let go of the rogue administrations and to enter into God's public social order. Okay. At this point in the narrative, Adam is the Zadik, whose fidelity, whose faithfulness opens channels through which divine generosity becomes fruitful within the created world. This is just me unpacking this verse here in Proverbs 11:30. Adam is the Zadik, the just one. Okay, he is the just one. He is the just one who is the foundation of the world, whose faithfulness, whose fidelity, which means his living out his vocation, his calling. It opens up channels. Think of the water that needs to be unbound, the chesed that needs to be released, that opens up channels of divine generosity that becomes fruitful for the entire created world. Okay. Today, the rest of today's learning is going to be focused on the metaphor of the tree being the king. If you have not read this book, Trees and Kings, William Osborne, a number of the insights here are being taken directly from this. I do recommend this work. If you enjoy academic ancient Near Eastern studies, you probably will enjoy this work. One of the beautiful proposals he makes based on archaeology is that the most likely early structure of the menorah was like this. It was more tree-like. It was not like the menorah that we typically see today. I know many will claim that we received the design that we have now from an oral tradition. It might be, but at some point the menorah was likely structured more like a tree, more like what we see here. Regardless of the structure of the menorah, it does represent a tree. And in the ancient world, I mentioned how mountains would be a cosmic axis, like an axis mundo, the intersection between the higher worlds and the lower worlds. That would often be what a cosmic mountain is. When I speak of a cosmic temple, a cosmic mountain, I'm referring to that. In the same vein, a tree, a cosmic tree, would often be just as well a cosmic axis. Quite often, that tree would be specifically on the cosmic mountain. We see this in ancient Near Eastern iconography, where a tree, the tree of life, we often call that in archaeology the tree of life, it stands at the center of the world, connecting the upper worlds and the lower worlds. Quite often in art, in the ancient iconography from Sumeria, from Phoenicia, this tree is represented as the dwelling of the gods, just like with the cosmic mountain. We often see royal figures positioned next to this tree. This tree acts within these cultural settings as an axis mundi, the center of the world. Why am I speaking about this? Well, because Genesis chapter 2 and 3 was not written in a vacuum. We learn from our sages that Torah speaks in the language of humans, in the language of man. As a result, it was spoken in the context of ancient cultures that had the conceptual language of what we're speaking about here. Quite often, this axis mundi, this cosmic tree on the cosmic mountain, would be surrounded by cherubim or divine throne guardians who would be there to protect the tree or to prevent access to it. Which, by the way, if you're familiar with how Genesis 3 ends, we end the story with two cherubim guarding the tree. I mentioned that here, right here, actually. Many depictions feature winged creatures or deities flanking a central tree with symmetry on both sides. This is very similar to what we see in Genesis 3:24 at the end of the story. Okay. The menorah, as I've mentioned, is the embodiment of this tree of life motif in ancient Israel. It's placed in the sacred space. It has the fires burning on it. It is rooted in these lower worlds. It is reaching up heavenward, distributing light like divine energy. And what's interesting here, I noticed this some time ago, that this earlier rendition of the menorah happens to map very, very conveniently with the Sephirot. If you look at the Sephirot here, they map very easily onto this version of the menorah. Okay, that might be completely by accident, but bear with me. So we're speaking about the menorah in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. Like in the ancient Near Eastern, that's ANE, ancient Near Eastern cosmic trees, the menorah is placed in a sacred spot. Okay, we have a temple, and before that, the tabernacle. But unlike these mythic trees, this tree is not being guarded by the gods. Okay, it's being entrusted to the care of the Kohanim, of the priests, and the Leviim, the Levites, and ultimately to the entirety of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. Okay, in this capacity, God has taken what it was the vector of the gods, and he's given it into the care of his people. This is why, for example, the significance of Memlechet HaKohanim, when the Torah calls the children of Israel a kingdom of priests. Our mission as the Jewish people is to be a light to the nations, not to hoard immortality or to hoard the light, but to be a light to the nations. This is part of the significance here of how we see that the Torah is called a tree of life. And I'm going to get a little bit ahead of us here because I need to give these metaphors so that you can more fully embrace what's going to come. In Genesis 3:24, when we are told that there are the two cherubim who are at the tree of life to protect it with a flaming sword, the word for sword is chorev. We are going to go into depth with this. Chorev. When we get to Exodus 3, when Moses encounters the burning bush, what is the name of the mountain? The mountain is Chorev. That's not an accident. We have the burning sword and the cherubim protected by the Chorev. We come to the mountain and we have Moses finding the burning bush. I'm going to give you a big spoiler alert because I want this to sit deeply in your mind until this matures and until in a few weeks we're ready to unpack it. But this burning bush is the tree of the garden. Okay, it has been found here in a state of neglect. Choreva also means to be dry, to be barren, to be waste. It has no partner in the world. Moses encounters Hashem and the divine name at Horeb. He's told to come back to the mountain to receive the Torah. The same mountain we call Sinai is also the mountain of Horeb. So we have Genesis 3. We have the sword, the Horeb, protecting the mount. We have Moses meeting Hashem at Horeb, the mountain. He comes back to the same mountain. He receives the Torah with the entire nation of Israel, the Jewish people. Now, notice this is very fascinating. What is the Mishkan? The Mishkan is the mobile, portable sanctuary, which at some point gives way to the temple, the Mikdash. For the first 13 months that we arrive at Sinai, we are stationed at the foot of Sinai. We arrive in the month of Sivan, and we leave the following year. I believe actually it's only 12 months in the month of Iyar. During that year, we are receiving Torah from Sinai. And just as we round off that year, we commission the tabernacle. This is Exodus 39 and 40. We commission the priesthood, Leviticus 9. And then we receive the instructions for how to break down and make the tabernacle portable. This is Numbers chapters 5 and following. In Numbers 10, we are told to pack up the tabernacle and to carry its vestments with us. This is highly, highly important. The presence of God, the tabernacle vestments, including the menorah, moves from the mountain and becomes carried by the Jewish people. It becomes carried by Israel. Every time we leave camp, every time that we are the pillar of fire or cloud moves, we would pack up camp and we would move and bring the mobile Mishkan, the non-stationary sanctuary with us, and we would then set up in a new location. This is highly important because of the way that God has structured his relationship with the Jewish people. This runs deep. God has chosen to invest himself with Israel. We're told in the Torah that God is going to punish the people of Israel for covenant infidelity, including scattering us among all the nations. This word for scattering that's being used here is the same word used for how Adam and Eve are driven out from the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3:23 and 3:24. It's the same word. Obviously, we've experienced the destruction of both of our temples, the first temple and the second temple. They've both been destroyed. We are praying and working for the rebuilding of the temple. This will be our third temple. But as we are in the Galuth, as we are in exile, God continues to be with us in the same way that he was with the mobile Mishkan. We still carry with us the tree of life. We still carry with us the Torah. It's still part of what we carry with us. So it's interesting to note the gravity, the weight of our exile has resulted in many theological speculations about why God allowed it to happen. The amount of death that has happened, the amount of pain that has happened. Our galuth, our exile, has been extended for generations. A sage in the Talmud reasoned, he speculated, that the reason that God allowed for the exile to happen was so that we would add gerim. Vayotosifu alehem gerim, so that we would add gerim. The translation here reads converts. The Hebrew there is the gerim. The gerim, as we've been learning, I encourage you to catch up with our field notes. The ger is both the sojourner at the gate and the sojourner who is incorporated into the altar. Okay, both levels, the ger toshav, the ger zedek. The reason why God sent us into exile, of course, there is also the consequences of covenant violation, but there's also the potential to gather to ourselves the gerim. This reminds me of the mission of Adam. It says that he takes souls. Okay, he takes souls, locheach nafashoth. Okay, he takes souls. In a similar way, our exile among the nations is a process of the dissemination of the Torah in such a way that when we are regathered with the holy individuals from the nations back to the land. Going back to the theme of the king and the tree, I mentioned the idea of the axis mundi, okay, the center of the world, the connection point between the lower world and the upper worlds. This is an ancient Near Eastern concept. Also in the ancient Near East, the king was depicted as a cosmic tree. A great example of that is in Daniel 4, the story of Nebuchadnezzar, with the birds nestling under his wings, the animals eating under the shadow of the canopy, the branches extending out, suggesting political influence. This is developed very strongly in the idea in Daniel 4 in metaphor. This you can see it also in Ezekiel 17 and 31. This was a common ancient Near Eastern motif. Okay, it's going to hold a lot of weight here as we continue. We're going to look now at the comparison between the kings of Judah and Israel and the calling and the role of Adam in the garden. As mentioned, in the ancient Near East, kings were often depicted as trees. Okay, really important. There's reference here in the Egyptian imagery to kings' names being inscribed onto the trees. Okay, we're moving now into Psalm 1. You are going to see the Edenic motifs here rather quickly. Okay, it says Ashrei ha'esh asher lo chalak ba'adzath rashaim uvderech ha'teim lo amad uvmoshav leitzim lo yashav. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scorners. Ki im b'torath Adonai chefso, uvathoratho yeshe yomam v'layla. But his delight is in the Torah of Hashem, and in his Torah he meditates day and night. This is a regnal metaphor. This is a kingly metaphor. This will become clear as we continue. Wachaya ka'et shatul al page mayim. He shall be like a tree planted by the streams of water. Very Edenic. We've learned in the ancient Near East that the king, so not the king, but the image that represented the king or the deity was brought to the side of a river for the mispeh ceremony, for the cleansing of the mouth and for the filling of the idol, the physical idol as a vessel for that deity. Obviously, we don't hold that, but that imagery has great significance for the role of the image of God in the way that Torah is using it in ancient Israel. He shall be like a tree planted by streams of water. Asher peryo yetain ba'ito. That brings forth its fruit in his season. Lo yabol v'chol asher ya'aseh latzliach. His leaf shall not wither. Whatever he does shall prosper. The English here is not incredibly clear. Okay, it says here that brings forth its fruit in its season. The Hebrew there is masculine. Okay. It says Asher Piryo, which fruits or brings forth his fruit, Yatain Ba'ito, in his season. That brings forth his fruit in his season. We've learned the importance of the maturation process of the tree by the springs of water. The access to the tree required maturation. This just person, this righteous person, brings forth the fruit, his fruit, in his season. Okay, specifically, there is a maturation process, a waiting for arrival to the fruit. Okay, so I want to note that. There's a very clear connection between the way Psalm 1:2 is worded and Deuteronomy 17:19. This should be 19. This is the passage that commands the king to keep a copy of the Torah with him at all times, that he would read from it day and night. The Torah shall be with him, a Sefer Torah shall be with him. Korah, he shall read vo in it, kol yemei chayav, all the days of his life. Very similar to Psalm 1:2. It says, Yeshe Yomam V'Layla, he shall speak the words of it. He shall recite the words of it day and night. This is a regnal image. The image here is of the king and his Torah. There is a chiastic structure in what follows here. I'm going to just give, first of all, this is the overall big picture on what's happening. I'm going to read the English of verses 4, 5, and 6. Not so the wicked. They are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the just. For Hashem knows the way of the just, but the way of the wicked shall perish. As you know, a chiastic structure is an inverse or a reversal. Okay, we have a climbing up to a peak and then a climbing back down from that peak, with both sides of the chiasm, both literary sides of the chiasm, either being either a mirror of each other or sometimes the opposite of each other. This is the chiasm in Psalm 1. Okay, we have A, the path rejected by the just one. B, the Torah being a delight and a constant meditation. C, this is the middle, the tree of life, the rootedness, the prosperity, the fruitfulness. Now, it's in contrast here, we have the chaff of death being rootless and being driven away. The wicked fail to stand in judgment. This judgment, by the way, is a very eschatological image, standing in the judgment. And then the paths diverge. Hashem attends to the just, and the wicked perish. Notice here how the path is rejected by the just in verse 1, and the paths diverge in verse 6 at the other side of the chiasm. In the letter B of the chiasm, verse 2, the Torah is the delight and the constant meditation. In contrast, the wicked fail to stand in judgment. The formation of the just one is the delight and the meditation in the Torah. Of course, in C, you can see here the tree of life contrasted for its rootedness and its prosperity and its fruitfulness, contrasted with the chaff, which is rootless and is driven away. The psalm after Psalm 1 is Psalm 2. Now, bear with me here. I'm going to read the English of Psalm 2, and I'm going to point out a few of the interesting points. We're going to see a hyperstructure that connects Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. Psalm 1, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers conspire against Hashem and against his anointed. The Hebrew there is Mashiach. Let us break their bonds apart and cast off their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord mocks them. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury. But I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Let that mountain reference there sinking for a minute. I will declare the decree. Hashem said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance and the ends of the earth as your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron, like a potter's vessel. You shall shatter them. So now, O king, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth, serve Hashem with fear and rejoice with trembling. There's a big translation debate here in the next verse. I went with the more conservative translation. Worship in purity, lest he be angry and you perish from the way, and his wrath is quickly kindled. Happy are all who take refuge in him. If any of you have questions on that translation, I would be delighted to speak up with you in the Q&A that follows. If you're not part of that Q&A, you can join at perfectingtheworld.com for membership to be able to participate in our live Q&A sessions. There's a big translation discussion in verse 12, and it's more than I want to focus on with this class. A few of the highlights here with this passage, okay, it says, the nations rage, Lama, Rakshu Goim, the nations are raging against the king, against Hashem. They're plotting a vain thing. They're taking a stand. The rulers conspire together against who? Al Adonai against Hashem, wa al Mashiach against his anointed. Okay, this idea of the anointed is the idea of a king who's been anointed by a prophet, or whose lineage, who's part of a dynasty that's been anointed by a prophet. Okay. Hashem tells this individual, I will declare the decree, Absapran al Hoch, I shall recount the Hoch, the decree. Adonai Amar Ali Bani Ata, Hashem said to me, you are my son. Ani Hayom Techa, today have I begotten you. Okay. Very significant. The idea of the royal sonship of the king was a common ancient Near Eastern motif. Okay, this was not unique just to Judah and to Israel, but the kings were seen as being in a special relationship with God because they were representing God in a way. It's very much the idea, as we've spoken about, the image of God intensified in the king, which this motif is going to come up a lot more. Now, look at the big picture chiasm that connects Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. I'm sorry, this is really small. We're going to focus in on it. There is a chiasm that connects from Psalm 1:1 to the end of Psalm 2. Why is that significant? Let me just tell you why it's significant. Why? Because Psalm 2 is an explicitly regnal psalm. It's a royal psalm with a king of the house of David being anointed and the nations protesting against him. Psalm 1, as I proposed, is also a royal psalm. I mentioned how the idea of the Torah being meditated upon day and night, it maps onto the idea of the king having a Torah scroll and reading from it all the days of his life. That wasn't as clear, but Psalm 2 is undeniably regnal. It's undeniably a reference to the anointed king of Judah. There is a chiasm that connects Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. Okay, I'm not going to go through the small text here, but I am going to go through the closer version of it. Okay, so we're looking at it this way. We're looking at the A and the A. Okay, the A and the A, the B and the B, the C and the C, and the D in the chiasm. Okay, the A, we have Ashrei Ha'esh, blessed is the man. In contrast here to Psalm 2:12, Ashrei Kol Chosevo, blessed are all who take refuge in him. Okay, there's a very similar wording on both sides of this. This begins with individual Torah piety. It ends with communal refuge in the Messianic King. Both have the idea of the Ashrei. The fact that the Ashrei is used on both sides of these Psalms is meant to be an inclusio that links the Psalms together. It shows the chiastic, it's a chiastic key that shows the structure. B, we have the fruitful obedience versus the shattered rebellion. Very similar to what we saw in Psalm 1. We had a very similar contrast between the just one and the Rasha and the wicked one. Psalm 1:3, the just one is like a tree with enduring fruit. Psalm 2:9, the rebellious are shattered like pottery. We have two ways that submit and thrive. And then we have the permanent, which is the just and the righteous and the king. And then we have the non-permanent, which would be those that rebel. This is the central one, C, divine knowledge and judgment. Psalm 1:6, Hashem knows the way of the just, the wicked will perish, which is contrasted here. He who sits in heaven laughs, I have installed my king. Okay, these are meant to be parallels of each other. They're meant to be echoes of one another. Okay, D, the central pivot. Okay, this is the central pivot of the chiastic. Let me just refresh myself here. D is actually the middle of the chiastic. Okay, this is the rebellion of the nations. The nations here are rebelling against the Torah king, against the king of Judah, of the house of David, of the Davidic dynasty. They are in rebellion against this king. This king is upon the mountain of Zion. Okay, I am hoping that you can see the connection with Adam. Adam was upon the cosmic mountain. He was being formed in the Torah, meditating upon the Torah, looking upon it and being formed into the fullest extent of the image of God. The king, as a son of God, is likewise being transformed and formed into the image of God as well. Okay. The significance theologically, Psalm 1 shows the ideal Israelite king or person who is rooted in Torah and is faithful. Okay, this also maps onto the person individually as well. This is referring primarily in its first register to the king of Judah. Psalm 2 reveals the cosmic opposition to that king and to God's sovereignty. The tree in Psalm 1 becomes the throne in Psalm 2. Don't forget that the king in the ancient Near East was often represented by the tree. Okay, his delight in Torah in Psalm 1 becomes enthronement in Zion in Psalm 2. These are very important mappings onto each other. Okay. The tree of life and the righteous king, where Psalm 1 opens with a single blessed individual who delights in the Torah of Hashem. He's described as a tree planted by streams of water. This is a very clear allusion to the tree of life in Eden. This is the Torah-rooted human. Remember, the king is also the tree. Okay. This is not just an ordinary person. You see royal themes here throughout Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. This is likely the vision of the ideal king. What's interesting, it begins the entirety of the book of Psalms. The majority of Psalms are written by King David. Okay, he is the author of the majority of the prayers of Israel that are encoded and preserved in the Psalter. We see in Deuteronomy 17 that he meditates in the Torah day and night. He stands by covenant fidelity. This is Psalm 1. Now, Psalm 2 shifts from the private piety to the public conflict of the nations, where the kings and their rulers conspire against Hashem and against his Mashiach, his anointed. It says here, Hashem speaks to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." This royal figure is granted the nations as an inheritance. He is the point at which the nations come into the Malchus Shemayim, the kingdom of the heavens. He is extending the reach of Eden and the extent of the knowledge of God outward. What's happening in the garden, he is extending that outward. Okay, he is doing the avoda, bringing the godliness down into the world and elevating the world up. I need to emphasize that what he's doing is not just him alone, but it's him intensifying the act of others doing the same. It ends here just like in Psalm 1 with the Ashrei, with the happy, with the blessed. Okay, let's big picture here, and then we're going to take this into some applications here. Psalm 1 shows what it means to live under divine rule. Psalm 1 shows individual Torah-rooted king, or the idealized Torah-rooted human. The just one, the Zaddik, becomes a tree of life, planted and fruitful. Psalm 2, as the development of this theme, shows what happens when the nations resist this rule. We see that the national messianic Davidic king is being set over the nations. He's being declared a king, a son. He becomes the agent of justice and refuge. Together we have the private justice, the Torah, and the public justice, which is the agent of Hashem, which is Hashem's Mashiach. The connections with Adam and the royal imagery here with Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, to me, they scream off the page. The story of Adam in the garden is also the story of Psalms 1 and Psalm 2. Adam is planted in the garden in Eden. And as we will continue to learn, he is given a dominion, a throne. He is given regnal responsibilities, the responsibilities of a king. He is the Zadok who is supposed to bring godliness down into this world and elevate the world into godliness. Both. He is the axis mundi, the center of the world. He has the tree, he has the mountain, is the center of the world, the point between which they come together. Okay. Genesis 2:8 says that God planted the garden and placed the human there. Psalm 1 says he is like a tree planted by streams of water. This is no accident. The blessed one of Psalm 1 is the Adam who succeeds. He is the one who is rooted in Torah. We have seen already the idea that Adam and the tree are doing the same thing. Okay, in the garden, the tree of life, so at the center, in Psalm 1, Torah becomes the tree of life. The one who meditates in it day and night thrives, bears fruit, and also prospers. Let's bring this into the prophets, and this will complete the prophetic image that I'm trying to develop here. This is Isaiah chapter 11. It says, "Vayatze choter migeza yishe v'netzer misharasav yifre, and there shall come forth a rod of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow forth from his roots." Okay, this branch, this growing, is coming from a very unexpected place. This reminds me very much of the burning bush at Horeb, an image that we have yet to fully develop. This is obviously referring to the Messiah of the house of David. He comes from a lineage that has been cut down and is expected to be dead. That's the current situation that we are in. It says here, "V'necha alav ruach Adonai," and the spirit of Hashem will be upon him. Ruach Hakma, the spirit of wisdom. Uvina, and understanding. Ruach Eitzah, the spirit of counsel, Gavura, and severity. Ruach Da'ath, the spirit of knowledge. Yirath Adonai, and the fear of Hashem. Now count these specific references here. The spirit of Hashem, spirit of wisdom, spirit of understanding, spirit of counsel, spirit of might, spirit of knowledge, and the spirit of the fear of Hashem. You can count them right here. There are 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why is that significant? 7 is also, of course, the number of the menorah. Okay, it's the menorah. It's the number of the menorah, the number of the tree, of the cosmic tree in the tabernacle. Okay. In this case, you can see here the idea as well of the king being the tree. Okay, beautifully significant. Wahaya ba'yom hahu shoresh she'asher omed lanesamim ala goyim yudoshu wahaitha manuchatho kavod. In that day it shall be, this is still Isaiah 11, that the root of Jesse that stands for a banner for the peoples, to it shall the nations seek, and his resting place shall be glorious. Okay. It's a very beautiful picture here. This is the picture of Adam in the garden. Okay. Before this ever was any kind of a messianic indication, this was always the picture of Adam in the garden. Highly significant. This was always the picture of Adam in the garden, calling humanity, the Zadok, who would be the channel of chesed to the world, would call the rest of humanity into the same relationship that he had with God, to be formed into the image of God and matured through the Torah. Adam was not merely the first man, he was the first messianic, kingly, priestly figure appointed by God. He was formed in the Zelem Elohim. He was formed with the calling, the vocation to be the image of God. He was placed in the garden. He was charged with cultivating, guarding. We haven't gotten to the naming yet, but it's very important. Discerning and mediating life. He stood at the center of sacred geography in the world. He was placed beside the tree of life, which is the living Torah. He was appointed to conduct the liturgy of the knowledge of Hashem, the Dath Hashem. He was there to protect the garden, that's the Shemor, and to do the avoda, to bring in the holiness into the world. What the beautiful reality is of the Mashiach, okay, and however you hold about the Mashiach, whatever you think the Mashiach is supposed to be, a mistake that the Jewish and Christian world has both made on a very high level is the thought that the Mashiach is a deus ex machina. In the ancient Greek world, they had these plays called tragedy plays, where they would have the hero go through a series of devastating losses, loss after loss after loss. And at the end of the play, they would resolve all the problems by having one of the Greek gods from the pantheon, a person dressed like him, obviously, brought in with a rope, and the rope was attached to a machine, and they would bring him into the scene, and he would fix all of his problems. It was called Deus ex machina, the God from the machine. The Messiah is not a God from the machine. Okay, the mistake that so many make is thinking that I don't have to do it because God will do it for me. I don't have to do it because the Messiah will do it for me. I don't have to do it because I'm going to wait for the Messiah to do it. We're not going to build a temple because we're going to wait for God to do it, for the Messiah to do it. I'm not going to obey Torah or give up avodah zarah because the Messiah did it for me. These different positions of passivity nullify the very idea for why the Messiah is even a thing in Judaism. The Messiah is not the nullification. He's not the batul, the nullification of human fidelity. He is the intensification of human fidelity. He is the intensification of Israel's calling. He is the intensification of your calling. He calls humanity to be more the image of God than it currently is living as. He calls humanity into a closer fulfillment of their responsibilities. In this regard, you are the soil. You think of the soil that had to be tilled, and the Messiah is the seed. So, yes, we are not waiting for an act of God. We're not waiting for God to do something. In contrast, God is waiting for us to act. Many think of the Messiah as simply being a man. The Messiah is a moment. It's a moment. It's a moment that we all need to seize. We all have the opportunity to seize that moment with every generation. In the words of the prophets, it is a branch. It is fragile, a fragile branch that grows up from a stump. The stump appears to be dead, but there's still life there. And it extends life from Israel to all the nations. What I'm challenging you to see is not to take the passivity of waiting for a Messiah to come as a God from the machine, a Deus ex machina, but rather to understand that the Messiah is here to intensify you, to intensify your fulfillment, not to make you more passive, but to make you more intense and more active, to make you more engaged with the mission that you're called to be. Now, how does this reflect back onto Adam in the garden? This is what Adam was. Okay, Adam was, so to speak, in both in metaphor and in literal sense, he was the first Mashiach. He was there to be the Kohen. He was there to be the king. He was there to bring the knowledge of God to the world, to spread the knowledge of God to all the nations, to all the peoples. And the mission failed, and it was entrusted to the people of Israel. That's why I called Israel the second Adam with the prior class. The idea is that the role, the mantle, has not been lost. It's been handed over to Israel to be that light, to be the cultivation of Mashiach and the Messiah moment for the nations. So I'll be moving here in just a few moments into the Q&A, where we can have any discussion or any questions. If you're not registered for that, perfectingtheworld.com, and you can join us for the live Q&A on the Zoom session. It is private, and I look forward to seeing you there. That is on perfectingtheworld.com, and I will be there in about 30 to 60 seconds after I end this session. Thank you for joining us. Please join us tomorrow evening for field notes for our continuing study about the role of the ger as we look at the responsibility of Israel toward the Ger Sha'ar, the Ger Toshav. Have a great evening.
Join the perfectingtheworld.com community today.